Welcome to Session 14, the most pivotal chapter in American history. The unresolved question of slavery finally tears the nation apart, and the country must figure out how to put itself back together. By the end, you'll be able to explain the causes of the war, trace its turning points, understand what the Emancipation Proclamation did and did not do, and see why Reconstruction succeeded constitutionally but failed politically. Historians point to four intertwined causes of the Civil War, but slavery was the root of all of them. The Southern economy depended on enslaved labor. By 1860, enslaved people represented more wealth than all U.S. railroads and factories combined. Layered on top was states' rights. The South argued it had the right to leave the Union, and the two regions had grown apart economically. The North was industrializing, while the South stayed agricultural and slave-based. And sectionalism, fierce loyalty to one's own region over the nation, had been building for decades. But remember, the specific right the South wanted to protect was the right to keep slavery. Through the 1850s, the crisis kept escalating. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin dramatized slavery's brutality and shifted Northern opinion. Then, the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealed the Missouri Compromise, reopening the slavery question. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision ruled that enslaved people were property, not citizens, and that Congress couldn't ban slavery in the territories, enraging the North. 2 years later, John Brown raided Harper's Ferry, hoping to spark a slave uprising. Finally, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected without winning a single Southern state. Within weeks, South Carolina seceded, and the Union began to break apart. When Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in 1861, the war began. The two sides were unevenly matched. The Union North had 22 million people and 92% of the nation's industry, and used the Anaconda Plan to blockade and strangle the South. The Confederate South had only 9 million people, over a third of them enslaved, so it fought a defensive war on home ground, relying on brilliant generals like Robert E. Lee. The war's turning point came in 1863. At Gettysburg, the Union turned back Lee's invasion of the North. And at Vicksburg, it split the Confederacy in two along the Mississippi. After that, the South could no longer win. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, one of the most misunderstood documents in history. Here's what it did. It declared enslaved people in the rebelling Confederate States forever free, reframed the war as a fight against slavery, and let black men join the Union Army, and 180,000 did. But here's what it did not do. It did not free enslaved people in the loyal border states, and it couldn't immediately free anyone in Confederate territory, where the Union had no power yet. It was a war measure. Real abolition came with the 13th Amendment in 1865. After the war came Reconstruction. Constitutionally, it achieved a great deal. The 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th granted citizenship and equal protection, and the 15th protected the vote regardless of race. For a brief moment, black men voted and held office. 16 served in Congress. But white Southerners fought back with black codes, and the Ku Klux Klan used terror to suppress black rights. The decisive blow was the Compromise of 1877, which pulled federal troops out of the South. With no one left to enforce these rights, Reconstruction collapsed, and Jim Crow took hold for nearly a century. Let's test it. The Emancipation Proclamation declared enslaved people forever free. Which statement about it is accurate? Pause and choose. The answer is A. It applied only to enslaved people in the rebelling Confederate States, not the loyal border states, which Lincoln couldn't risk losing. It was a targeted war measure, not a universal one. The loyal border states were left out on purpose. Slavery itself was abolished everywhere, only by the 13th Amendment in 1865. Let's recap Session 14. Slavery was the root cause of the Civil War, even when framed as states' rights. Dred Scott and Lincoln's election pushed the South to secede. Gettysburg and Vicksburg, both in 1863, were the turning point. The Emancipation Proclamation freed enslaved people in the rebelling states only. And Reconstruction's real gains, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, collapsed after federal troops left in 1877.